All right, shall we get a start on everything?
Sure.
Great. So hi everyone, and welcome to tonight's Technorama Tuesday webinar, Preparing Your Station for the Smart Speaker. My name is Hannah Murray, and I'm the Student Services and Admin Officer at the CMTO. With us tonight is Josh Pearson from Technorama, who will be assisting in facilitating question time, which will be at the end of the session. So during the webinar, could you please pop your questions in the Q&A box throughout the webinar, and I'll make sure that they are asked and answered at the end as best as people can answer these questions. We are also, of course, joined by our wonderful presenter for this evening, Andrew Morris from the CBAA. And for those of you who don't know Andrew Morris is the Online Products and Services Manager at the CBAA, and he has 24 years experience in the Australian radio industry. His experience spans on-air, programming, and over the past 15 years, leading Sydney's Hope 103.2 FM's digital and online content strategy. So before we get right into it, I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We acknowledge that their sovereignty was never ceded. So, new research from Nielsen shows almost 1 in 5 Australians own a smart speaker. For an emerging technology, it's fast becoming mainstream. Tonight, Andrew will discuss the rise of the smart speaker in the connected home and how community radio is adapting to its popularity. Andrew's also going to outline the new partnership between the CBAA and iHeartRadio. So without any further ado, welcome Andrew.
G'day, thank you. It's great to be here. And yes, I've been with the CBAA for the last 3 months, started in early June after a stint at Hope 103.2, and thrown in the deep end in terms of discovering smart speaker technology. We signed a partnership at the end of 2018 with iHeartRadio, which we'll talk about a bit later. But in doing that, we've discovered a lot about smart speaker technology, what it can and can't do, and the challenges that it's bringing up for community radio. So we'll start the presentation, and I'll just share my screen and make sure that's working, and we'll get started. All right. So as Hannah said, the latest research from Nielsen is showing that, 1 in 5 Australians own a smart speaker. And we'll see through the presentation tonight that the increase in uptake of smart speakers, not only in Australia, but in the US, is surging quite a lot. So we're going to look at what smart speakers are. Now, I'm not a technical person. I'm more a product manager, if you like. So I will be starting pretty simply, talking about what smart speakers are. We'll look at the growth of smart speakers and voice search in the home, and the challenges and opportunities that present themselves with community radio. So firstly, let's talk about smart speakers. They're simply speakers with microphones and an internet connection. They're really much Bluetooth speakers, and they're, I guess, linked, if you like, to a virtual assistant such as Google's Assistant or Amazon's Alexa. Now, the chip on the device uses the device's microphone and listens out for hot word phrases such as Alexa or Hey Google. And once it thinks it hears that phrase, it starts to listen and follow the speech that follows, sending it across to Amazon and Google servers so they can interpret it. And once it's worked out how and what you're saying, the voice assistant then responds with an answer or an action. And it also realizes if you're not talking, and it will shut down. So Alexa and Google Assistants can perform a number of tasks, ranging from simple things such as timers and alarms to answering questions and telling jokes. Of course, as we'll find out where smart speakers are being used, and recipes, even the latest headlines, are quite popular. Most people, though, are primarily using them for listening to the radio or playing music with voice control or finding tracks and adjusting volume. Also, one thing that is becoming popular and could be a challenge for radio in the years to come is the use of creating routines. And We can talk a bit about that later, but pretty much, you know, when you wake up, you say, "Good morning, Google," and it will follow a routine. It will give you the latest news, weather. It will give you the most direct route to work. It can give you stock updates. It can play a track. It can give you the latest podcasts, maybe from the New York Times or whatever. And that's a routine that you can create by just saying a few words. It will trigger that routine. It's pretty amazing stuff. And it could be a challenge, as Steve Ahern says in his smart speaker demonstration, which he did for the CBF in May. You know, it could be challenging breakfast radio in the future. So why don't we look at some stats? I should say that the four major players in the Australian market at the moment are Google Home, and they have a variety of different products, such as Google Home, Google Assistant, and as I say Google, it's starting to play in the background, Google Stop. Sorry about that. Amazon Echo, Apple HomePod, Sonos, and Lenovo are also all players, but Google is definitely the major player in smart speakers in Australia, as you can see by that graph there. It dominates with just under 80%. Amazon Echo 7, Apple HomePod at 3, and other at 11. And we are seeing a lot more smart screens coming in. And with each of these different products, they require different codes and different skills to be written and different query strings to be created, so your radio station can be visible and heard on these different speakers. So it's quite complicated, and it is proving costly as well to be across all these devices. Now, if we look at the top 5 uses for Australians who own smart speakers, as I mentioned, listening to streaming music is the biggest by far, followed by weather forecasts, alarms, online search, and checking news down there at number 5. If we move along, in a typical week, do you ever use your smart speaker while? And we can see there, smart speakers very much a device that is opening up listening to radio and streams in the home, particularly in the kitchen and while house chores are being done. Cooking, you can see, and recipes are taking off. If you've got your hands basting a chicken or a turkey, you can't be turning pages of a cookbook, but you can actually ask Google or Alexa for recipes, and it will guide you through step by step through your cooking procedure. Getting ready for your day, as I mentioned, it can wake you up with an alarm and get you through a routine. Also through entertainment, you can connect it with a Chromecast and do voice commands to operate your television and operate Netflix as such. Working out and getting ready for bed through podcasts and watching TV. So that is through the Smart Audio Report published by Edison and NPR in America. Now we're looking at this report through Nielsen, which was released in July here in Australia. You can see the breakdown of demographics, the 25 to 54 year age bracket, the most common users of smart speakers. But it is being driven by young adults in America as well. And we can see that New South Wales, probably by population, is the biggest user, with Victoria in second and Queensland in third. As I mentioned in the opening, the growth of speaker uptake, smart speaker uptake, is massive. You can see in America that they're expecting a growth, or they were expecting a growth in 2017 to 2018 of 78%, and that
Andrew,
continues to grow. It's deemed at okay.
Your microphone, sorry, not your speaker.
Yeah, how's that? Is that working?
Still not back.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. I guess maybe if
you
people
can still hear Andrew.
What about everyone else?
A few people in the chat have said I can hear. I would check your speakers.
Okay, so I'll keep going?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the number of speakers, we can see massive growth uptake in America. This is also happening in Australia, not to the same extent, but it is deemed an emerging technology. But when Nielsen is saying 1 in 5 or 17% of Australians have smart speakers, it's fast moving from an emerging technology to a mainstream technology, and we should see that growth continuing through into 2020 and beyond. So for radio stations, it's definitely a tool that people are starting to use very much in the house. And yeah, voice search just generally growing dramatically. So how, as radio stations, we adapt to voice search through our websites of being discovered, and also through radio streams is going to be a great challenge for us, because as we'll play a bit later and show some stats, it can be challenging to be found through a smart speaker if you're not on TuneIn or iHeartRadio. Okay, so let's continue on, and we'll look at the music streaming business and the tech giants. Now, they are quite openly encroaching and looking at taking share from radio stations. And we've seen the introduction of Amazon Music and Google Music, and they are becoming big players along with Apple, Spotify, and the other streamers. I wanted to show you the Community Radio State of Play report, which was published in July 2019. It's called Listening to Audio in Australia from the State of Community Radio. And we can see there that live Australian radio still dominates all our listening at 62.3%. We can see streaming is taking us an increasing percentage. But having said that, over the last, I guess, 5 to 10 years, streaming, the numbers of people listening to our streams continues to sit at around 10%. And that's the same here in Australia to the UK and America. So predominantly AM, FM, and DAB is the main way people listen to radio, and streaming on desktops and apps and stuff is still around 10%, but we can see that's combining a few things there. Own music, 8.5%. I won't read out the rest, but you can see the breakdown. Podcast is growing, but it's still a small percentage of listening, share of listening here in Australia, much larger in America. Okay, so this is giving us an illustration of the dominance of our new streaming players in Australia. This is a report put out by Edison Research and Triton Digital here in Australia. It's called The Infinite Dial. It was published in 2019. And as you can see, over the course of 2017 to 2019, Spotify continues to increase and is just in front of Apple Music in terms of online streaming and awareness. We've also got Google Play, Amazon Music, and SoundCloud there. But as we can see, and as they have said, these streaming services are looking for more disruption, and they're looking towards radio and disrupting radio. So this is showing you the brand awareness of the aggregators here in Australia. iHeartRadio has just over 2 million downloads here in Australia, 2 million of their downloads of their app, and people listening to iHeartRadio. We've got TuneIn and the radio app, which is commercial radio. And you can see the growth in each of those platforms in awareness over the course of the last 3 years. And iHeartRadio making some massive inroads, and they are, as a part of ARN in Australia, looking to retain market share of people's listening habits. And that's why they're opening it up to ABC, government, and community radio. And we'll talk about more about our partnership with iHeartRadio in a moment. The Infinite Dial report by Edison, which you're looking at here, they made some observations. You can download this report from Google. Just search for the Infinite Dial report. Their major observations are that AM, FM, and DAB radio remains strong and performs much strongly than in America. That the audio space is extremely dynamic today and creating opportunities and threats for all players, including community radio. Podcasting continues to grow, but lags in comparison to trends from the US, and smart speakers represent an exciting new pathway for audio consumption. They were the major observations from this Infinite Dial report by Edison Research. Okay, the community radio and smart speakers, our relationship. There is a challenge for community radio, and CBAA has tried to help community radio get not only on mobile devices, but also to be heard on smart speakers. And in November last year, we signed an agreement with CBAA to join with iHeart to get community radio right across the country onto their platform. And in June this year, we launched with the first 15 stations, and now we're up to around 23 stations that are broadcasting on the iHeartRadio platform. I'll tell you about that a bit later. But it's a great initiative, and for stations who don't have the resources to create their own apps, to develop their own smart speakers, then yeah, this is a great opportunity to get a toe into smart speaker and being found on smart speakers and also on mobile, so you can be heard everywhere listeners want to consume you. So I guess what I'll do now is you can just see there from that screenshot that we've got Amazon, Google, we've got the Apple HomePod, we've got Lenovo, we've got also the smart screens, a whole lot of different speakers available, and each of them, also there's Bose and Sonos, each of them need skill sets to be written and created, which costs quite a bit of money. So I just wanted to share probably at this stage what the CBAA is wanting to do. And I guess you could describe what we're in at the moment as the fourth industrial revolution, which are things like artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, the Internet of Things, facial recognition and voice-activated assistants are changing the way that we live, work, and interact. And it's having a dramatic impact also on the business models of media organizations and not-for-profits like community radio. So this throws up some challenges for community radio and also some opportunities. And I'd just like to share that the CBAA are actually, we recognize that every community radio station needs to be available online in the places that our listeners expect for live and on-demand and podcasting. So the CBAA are trying to come up with some plans at the moment that will help the radio community sector transition to multiple platform delivery and be everywhere where our listeners expect us to be. And we're going to do this through looking at how we can help with encoding streaming solutions, online audio measurement, advertising insertion technology, and controlling and helping with central metadata solutions through API integration and being able to send that metadata, dynamic and static and all those other bits, to any device that is existing now and in the future. So that's our goals and our desires. We want to streamline stations' day-to-day operations and workflows, build their online audiences, and maximize their online revenues. And we believe that we can do that best through economies of scale with a sector that's as large as us, that we can leverage our membership base, which consists of 90% of the community radio sector, and get some good partnerships in place to bring devices and radio through multiple devices to our listener base right across Australia. So that's what we're trying to do. All right, the biggest challenges for community radio is actually being found on smart speakers. At the moment, you need to have skills, and those skills take coders and developers to write according to the rules that Google and Amazon create. And that time of coding is actually quite expensive. There are companies out there who are quoting prices of, around $5,000 for skills to be developed and licensed to stations. And then there's a monthly maintenance and support fee. And you need to do that not only for Google, but you need to do that for Alexa, for Bose, for Sonos, and etc. So those costs add up very quickly. Yeah, so that's a great challenge for community radio, is to be found on all these smart speakers. Not only that, when you do have the skills, there's the whole issue of, I guess, multiple stations with the same name. How does Google differentiate between hit in Sydney or hit in Brisbane, or through light in Melbourne when there's a light FM in New York? So there's great challenges there, and lots of thoughts about pronunciations. And what I'm going to do now is try and play a video of Steve Ahern talking about smart speaker demonstrations. And if I can just pull this up, I will attempt to share this video. Bear with me. Okay, here we go. This is Steve Ahern, and he's talking about the background to this video is he's talking about the effort and the time spent by commercial radio and ABC getting their skills so smart speakers can work. Is everyone seeing that?
Hey, Andrew, we can see the video. I'm not sure about everyone. I can't hear any audio from that video.
Neither.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's try again. I'll just take that back a bit.
To 7. It's a really good model that we find works very well, and because it's worked well in that house.
Let's stop. The ABC and commercial radio have done a lot of work to integrate their streams through the apps and through the commercial radio sector's radio app to be able to talk to these speakers. When you do that, you build a back end, not just in HTML or XML or RSS, which we're all familiar with. They're all code languages of websites. But you build extra code called SSML. It stands for something kind of different, but I remember it as Smart Speaker Markup Language. So whenever you want your stream to be found by these devices, you have to have an SSML code to be able to integrate with them. Commercial radio has done a great job. They have looked at all of the possible commercial radio stations in Australia, 300 and something. Then they've analysed what people ask for. 3AW is easy, but Gold FM is not easy. Is it Gold FM Southport? Is it Gold FM Gold Coast? Is it Gold FM Melbourne? How many ways can you say the name? Well, commercial radio have looked at that and they've put dozens of ways of saying the name in their app so that when you ask for that station, hopefully you'll find the right one. The radio app works best on Alexa. It hardly works at all on Google, although I know that commercial radio is trying to now negotiate with Google to get that active on Google. The ABC has been moderately successful with their ABC Listen app, which incorporates some SSML, and they put some into their websites. So these devices can pull the ABC feeds. But if you noticed, they told me that they were getting stations from iHeartRadio or from TuneIn. So there's another very interesting issue that I think stations and the radio industry in general into the future will have to consider. We're giving away our transmission path to these other providers. Are we getting the clicks? Are we realising the hits, the traffic? Or are we just giving it away to iHeartRadio or TuneIn, who will then monetize it for their benefit? So there's a whole lot of interesting issues. That's why commercial radio decided to go with their own app and their own interface.
All right, so I'll just come back and I'll stop sharing that. And now, can I just check that you can see the PowerPoint presentation at the moment?
Not currently.
Okay. All right. Okay, sorry about this. I'll just try and get back into my... So as Steve Ahern mentioned, so I guess the first step for community radio is that we can have this partnership with iHeartRadio that gets us quite easily onto the likes of Google Home and through the Google Assistant. So stations that have already signed up to iHeart through the CBAA can be found on the Google Home by default. When we just say, hey Google, play Hope 103.2, it will play Hope 103.2.
Streaming Hope 103.2 from iHeartRadio.
I didn't mean to do this at the moment, but anyway, it's doing it.
We still can't see your presentation screen, sorry.
Okay.
All right.
So so that's a great thing. Before we could get iHeart, before we could do the partnership with iHeart, stations, community radios struggled to be found on Google, but through iHeart, they've done some relationships building with Google, and I believe are the default aggregator on Google. With Alexa, it's a little harder. I think Tune In by default is their default. So yeah, we've got some good success with Google at the moment. Sorry, I'll still try and bring up my screen presentation. Having some problems here, as you can see. Apologies for this.
Just while we're waiting for Andrew to get his screen up, if anyone has any questions currently, could you pop them in the Q&A, and we'll start collating your questions for Andrew to answer.
Okay, I can't get my screen, Hannah.
That's okay, I'll come around and help you. Josh, do you want to have some comments about the conversation so far?
Sure. Hello, put my headphones on. I guess, you know, people, there's a few people on and listening and stuff like that. Like, has anyone got any questions or anything so far that they want to ask? You can either raise your hand or put them in Q&A, and we can start collating them now. Is there anyone in the chat? Anyone thinking this is a great idea for the station? Anyone want to try it? Who's already doing it? No. Quiet on the front there. I guess the next thing we could probably talk about then, guys, is coming up. You know, there's going to be a few other of these Technorama presentations and webinars on partnership with the CMTO. So if you've got anything that you want to know about, want us to present on, want us to help with, I can see your full screen now, Andrew. You know, do let us know. You can send us an email to info@technorama.org.au, or jump onto our website or Facebook page and, you know, ask questions and let us know what you want to hear about and what you want to hear. And I'll hand back to Andrew now.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so in May, we finalised the agreement with the Australian Radio Network, who licenses iHeartRadio in Australia, and launched in July with 16 stations. We're now at 23 community radio stations streaming on the iHeartRadio platform, and that's allowing listeners to be heard on mobile quite easily. For stations that can't afford a good mobile app, they're using iHeartRadio as a way to point listeners to their streams, and they can include that in their sweepers and all that kind of stuff. It's also a great way to be easily accessible on emerging smart speaker technology. And as we've mentioned, the growth of that, it's important to be found on smart speakers. And there are some, if you do get yourself a smart speaker and have a listen and have a search for some stations, you'll see how hard it is to find stations. But the 23 stations that are on iHeart through the CBAA can be found reasonably well. There are some exceptions. Brisbane's community station 4ZZZ is one of those stations, which can be challenging, and a few other stations as well. But I know James Cridland, and we're working to try and get stations with ZZZ or different pronunciations, which the AIs find hard, because really the AI is pretty basic. It's not very intelligent, and the skills have to be written to really to make that they're basically very simple instructions. And there's not a lot of AI intelligence going on with smart speakers at the moment. The commercial radio stations have had to do many different kinds of pronunciations to include in their skills to pick up all the variations, and also shortcuts for how you look for your favorite radio station. But they seem to be working reasonably well on iHeartRadio. As you can see on that screen, that's how the CBAA stations look like on a mobile device and on desktop. It can also include the now playing data. It has a fingerprint technology which can identify most of your mainstream songs that you're playing on. All right. Now, one of the cool features that we have with iHeartRadio is that we can target your listeners through the iHeartRadio platform. And 4ZZZ was one of the first stations to do that. They took advantage of in-app messaging. And as you can see on the right-hand side, where it says subscribe to 4ZZZ, this radiothon, that message appeared as soon as you opened the app. You either had listened to the station at some point that it had been on iHeart, and it was one of your more popular stations that you listened to. So it would show, and the click-through rate for that was at least, I think, 2 to 3% at the moment. And then the message center, which is on the left side, within the iHeartRadio platform, there is a cog in the top left-hand corner of the app, and that's where all the messages are coming from iHeart. And iHeart are great to work with, and they'll drop in messages to your message center tailored to you. Now, only listeners to 4ZZZ are seeing that. There was a message there, and that they would get a red dot on saying that there was a notification for them, and they could click. The click-through rate for that was 12 to 13%. So that's really high in terms of click-through rates. And we look forward to seeing the conversions that can take place once more people are listening to community radio through the app. They tried that only weeks into launch. FBI in the last 2 weeks tried it for their supporter drive as well, and they did the same. They had a message center app, and they had the in-app message that appeared as soon as people opened up iHeart who were listeners to FBI through iHeartRadio. We've got all the specs for how you can get involved in the partnership, and I'd be happy to send them to you if you're interested. There's a one-off fee for $300 and an annual fee of $150 in maintenance and support each year going forward. We've had to create server infrastructure to be able to send mass streams to iHeart. They don't want to deal with individual stations. They want one stream. And they've also got rules with Optus, which enable free listening if you're an Optus subscriber to iHeartRadio. So this, that's why we've set up servers and all that kind of stuff. But we've got spec sheets that I can tell you about that and send to you as well. The feedback from FBI, from 4ZZZ, from 88.9 in Tamworth is they love it, and they couldn't do it by themselves. And so it's been a great resource for them. You can search, if you want to watch the half-an-hour demonstration from Steve Ahern, it's on YouTube. You just search Smart Speaker Demonstration by Steve Ahern, and you can watch that. It's a very helpful YouTube demonstration. And just finally, that's Grace from 4ZZZ. She was saying that they don't have the resources to tackle a project, so using iHeart as their own station app is a great thing, and also to be found on smart speakers, very handy as well. That's my presentation. I'm sure I've left out things, but thank you for putting up with myself over the last half an hour. I hope you found something interesting about smart speakers, that you can actually see that it's an emerging technology, but also that next year, and pretty much now, is entering mainstream, and voice search, not only for mobile, but also looking ahead of how we can make our websites voice search friendly, are great challenges for community radio. I guess I'd probably be asked, but we are, as the community radio CBAA, looking at wanting to put an aggregation app out there for the sector, as well as making affordable station apps also available as well. But we can talk about that in Q&A or at a later time. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. All of that's extremely interesting, and I think very relevant for all of us in the community radio sector. We're going to have a look at the questions now. So if you haven't submitted your burning question yet, get in there fast so we can find out and see what we can come up with. So the first question is from John Urey. Hi, John. When will you hold a training session on the use of this technology? And Josh Pearson, would you like to answer that question?
Look, we can answer it. Again, as I said before, whilst we're having some technical difficulties back with Andrew's screen, if there are things that people want to have specific sessions on, etc., we can either run them as one of these CMTO webinars, or Technorama can run one for a smaller group of people if it's easier. on, setting one of these up and going through a bit of step-by-step on, how to do this for your station. One of the things we would obviously like to see is more people get involved so we can make sure that, we're not just doing, if we're going to do it one-on-one, John, it's a phone call and you and I can talk one time, but we'd rather see a group of stations get together and, do a full training session on how to actually write some code that does it and, at the end of the day, see a real live working example from your own station. Has anyone got any other questions? I think Meredith has said in the chat, it's a new concept and we're not sure yet how we can best utilize it. It really depends on, what your station wants and if you think your listeners are going to be, interested in it and stuff. I don't know, Andrew touched a bit, about some metrics and that, there's lots of people picking up smart speakers. I know at home I've got one and the first thing I say is, hey, Google, or hey, Alexa. I have two of them. Make them fight each other sometimes. Listen to my favorite radio station. It is something where I think we are going, and it's going to be my kind of thing on technology like this is any way people can listen to your station is a great way to have and do and market and share.
I think, we have to be platform agnostic really these days because people want to consume the way they want to consume. So it's as much as we can, it's great to be across all platforms if we can do that. So, and that's the challenge that the CBAA, I guess, we're looking at is how, through economies of scale, can we help the whole community sector get across onto multiple devices at lower cost as possible.
Ray Sheldrick has just asked, will there be a demo or discussion at the CBAA conference?
There will be a mini lab where we'll be talking about iHeartRadio and we'll have our smart speakers down there. Yeah.
Wonderful. If that's all the questions, I'll give people just one more minute to put anything they want to know in the Q&A.
Yes. We can use this lovely minute to, again, talk about the next session that's coming up.
Indeed. So yes, before everyone heads off for the evening, I'd like to let you all know about the next Technorama webinar on the 29th of October, which is titled The Internet of Things. And this is the concept basically of connecting any device with an on and off switch to the internet and or to each other. This includes everything from cell phones, coffee makers, washing machines, headphones, lamps, wearable devices, basically anything you can poke a stick at. And it should be a really fascinating topic, and we'd love to see you there. So if you want to sign up to that webinar, go to the CMTO website, and it will be in the calendar in the online learning section. Any other questions before we go? Doesn't look like it. Okay, that about wraps everything up, I think. So thank you so much to Andrew Morris for presenting this fascinating webinar, and also to Josh Pearson from Technorama for helping facilitate. Thank you both so much.
Thanks to you, Hannah.
And just before everyone goes again, it would be awesome if you could fill out the feedback form that pops up after you've left the webinar. It really helps us to tailor the sessions to your interests and your needs. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming along, and hopefully we see you at the next webinar.